Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd end up in a legal battle over my own home, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name's Jack, and this is the story of how my new neighbor tried to claim my house as their own, and how I had to prove my ownership in court. It all started on a sunny Saturday morning in May. I was out in my front yard, mowing the lawn and enjoying the warm spring weather. I'd lived in this modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street for nearly 15 years, ever since inheriting it from my late grandmother. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was home. As I was finishing up the yard work, I noticed a moving truck pull up to the house next door. The "for sale" sign had come down a few weeks earlier, but I hadn't met the new owners yet. I figured this was my chance to introduce myself and welcome them to the neighborhood. I waited until they'd unloaded a few boxes before walking over. A middle-aged couple was directing the movers, pointing out where different pieces of furniture should go. I put on my friendliest smile and approached. "Hi there, I'm Jack, your new next-door neighbor. Welcome to the neighborhood." The woman turned to me with a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, hello, I'm Karen, and this is my husband Greg." Greg gave a distracted wave as he continued instructing the movers. I tried to make some small talk. "So, where are you folks moving from?" "We're originally from California," Karen replied, "but we've been living in an apartment downtown for the past year while house hunting. We're so relieved to finally have a place of our own." "Well, you picked a great street," I said. "It's a quiet neighborhood, lots of families. I've been here about 15 years myself." Karen's eyebrows shot up at that. 15 years? In which house? I pointed to my place, just right next door there. Inherited it from my grandmother back in '08. A strange look passed over Karen's face. She exchanged a glance with Greg, who had wandered over to join our conversation. "I'm sorry, but I think there must be some mistake," Karen said slowly. "That house is part of our property." I blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" Greg stepped forward. The realtor was very clear that we were purchasing both lots, this house and the one next door. Said it used to be one big property that got split up, but now it's being sold together again. My mind was reeling. "No, that's not possible. I've owned that house for 15 years. I have the deed and everything." Karen's expression hardened. "Well, I don't know what to tell you, but we have a deed too, and it clearly states that both properties are included." I held up my hands, trying to stay calm. "Look, there's obviously been some kind of misunderstanding. Why don't we all take a deep breath and figure this out? I'm sure if we contact the realtor." "There's nothing to figure out," Greg interrupted. "We paid for both properties, and that's what we're going to get. I suggest you start packing." My temper flared. "Now wait just a minute. You can't just show up and claim my home of 15 years. I don't know what kind of scam you think you're pulling, but—" "Scam?" Karen shrieked. "How dare you? We're upstanding citizens who worked hard to afford this property. If anyone's running a scam here, it's you, squatting in a house that isn't yours." By this point, we were all shouting. The movers had stopped what they were doing to stare at the commotion. I realized things were getting out of hand fast. Okay, I said, forcing myself to lower my voice. "This isn't getting us anywhere. Clearly there's been a major error somewhere along the line. I think we should all calm down and deal with this through proper channels. I'll contact my lawyer on Monday and we can get this sorted out." Greg sneered. "You do that, but don't be surprised when you're the one who ends up getting evicted." With that parting shot, they turned and stormed back into their new house, slamming the door behind them. I stood there for a moment, stunned by what had just transpired. Then I hurried back to my own home, my mind racing. As soon as I got inside, I went straight to my filing cabinet and dug out all the paperwork related to the house, the deed, property tax records, insurance documents, everything. I spent the rest of the weekend poring over it all, reassuring myself that yes, I was the legal owner of this property and had been for 15 years. But doubt kept nagging at me. What if there had been some kind of mistake? What if my grandmother's lawyer had messed something up when transferring the deed to me? What if there was some obscure legal loophole that could actually give the new neighbors a claim to my home? I barely slept that weekend. As soon as 9 a.m. Monday rolled around, I was on the phone with my lawyer, Amanda Chen. I'd worked with her a few times over the years for various legal matters, and I trusted her completely. "Jack, slow down," Amanda said after I frantically explained the situation. "Take a deep breath. From what you're telling me, it sounds like your new neighbors are the ones who've been scammed, not you. But let's not jump to conclusions. Can you bring me all your documentation? I'll review everything and we'll figure out our next steps." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Just having a professional in my corner made me feel better. "Thanks, Amanda. I'll head over to your office right away. As I was gathering up all my paperwork, I heard a commotion outside. I peeked out the window to see Karen and Greg in my front yard, measuring the property lines with a long tape measure. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. Getting into another shouting match wouldn't help anything. I hurried out to my car, pointedly ignoring my neighbors as they glared at me. I could feel their eyes boring into my back as I drove away. Amanda's office was a small but professional space downtown. Her assistant ushered me in right away, and I dumped the stack of documents on her desk. "This is everything I could find related to the property," I explained. "Deed, tax records, utility bills, insurance papers, you name it." Amanda nodded, already starting to sort through the pile. "Good, this is exactly what we need. Now, tell me more about your interaction with the neighbors. What exactly did they say?" I recounted the conversation in as much detail as I could remember. Amanda listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "And you've never had any issues with property lines or ownership before this?" she asked. I shook my head. "Never. I've been paying property taxes and insurance on that house for 15 years without a single problem." "All right," Amanda said. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to thoroughly review all of this documentation to make absolutely certain there are no issues on our end. Then, I'm going to reach out to the realtor who sold the property to your neighbors and try to get to the bottom of this. Can you get me their contact information?" "I'll ask around the neighborhood," I promised. "Someone's bound to know which agency handled the sale." "Perfect. In the meantime, do not engage with your neighbors any further. If they try to confront you, simply tell them that the matter is being handled by your lawyer and you have no further comment. Under no circumstances should you allow them into your home or on your property. Understand?" I nodded, feeling better already. "Got it. Thanks, Amanda. I don't know what I'd do without you." She gave me a reassuring smile. "That's what I'm here for. Try not to worry too much. From what I can see so far, your ownership seems rock solid. We'll get this sorted out." As I left Amanda's office, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had a plan. I had an expert on my side, and I was confident that the truth would come out. But little did I know, my neighbors were about to escalate things in a way I never could have anticipated. When I returned home, I was relieved to see that Karen and Greg were no longer in my yard. I hoped they'd taken the time to cool off and realize how ridiculous their claims were. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something that made my heart sink: a bright orange notice taped to my front door. With a sense of dread, I approached and yanked the paper off. It was an eviction notice, giving me 30 days to vacate the premises. My hands shook as I read it, hardly able to believe what I was seeing. How could they possibly have the authority to evict me from my own home? I immediately called Amanda to let her know about this new development. "They can't do that," she assured me. "They have no legal standing to issue an eviction notice. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. But the fact that they're escalating like this is concerning. I'm going to file for an emergency injunction to prevent them from taking any further action against you or your property." I spent the rest of the day in a fog, barely able to focus on anything. I kept replaying the conversation with Karen and Greg in my head, trying to understand how they could be so convinced that my house belonged to them. There had to be more to the story. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of a truck engine outside. I peered out my bedroom window to see a landscaping crew in my backyard, tearing up my vegetable garden. "Hey!" I shouted, throwing on some clothes and rushing outside. "What do you think you're doing?" The workers looked confused. One of them called out, "We were hired by the new owners to clean up the yard and put in a pool. Are you the tenant? They said you'd be moving out soon." My blood boiled. "I'm not the tenant, I'm the owner. And I never authorized any of this work. You need to leave immediately." Just then, Karen emerged from her house, coffee mug in hand. "Is there a problem here?" she asked sweetly. I whirled on her. "You know damn well there's a problem. You have no right to send workers onto my property. I told you this would be handled through our lawyers." Karen's fake smile disappeared. "And I told you that this is our property now. We're well within our rights to begin improvements. If you continue to squat here and interfere with our plans, we'll have no choice but to involve the police." "Go ahead," I snarled. "Call them. I'd love to report you for trespassing and destruction of property." We glared at each other for a long moment before Karen turned to the baffled landscapers. "I'm so sorry about this. Why don't you come back tomorrow? Hopefully, our stubborn neighbor will have come to his senses by then." As the workers packed up and left, I stormed back into my house and called Amanda again. She was as outraged as I was and promised to expedite the injunction. "Document everything," she advised. "Take photos of any damage they've done. If they show up again, call the police immediately. And Jack, I know this is incredibly stressful, but try to stay calm. We don't want to give them any ammunition to use against you." I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess in my backyard, salvaging what I could of my vegetable plants. Every so often, I'd catch Karen or Greg watching me from their windows. The tension was palpable. That evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it cautiously to find my other next-door neighbor, Mrs. Rossi, standing there with a concerned look on her face. "Jack, dear, is everything all right?" she asked. I couldn't help but overhear the commotion earlier, and those new neighbors were asking me some very strange questions about your house. I sighed and invited her in, explaining the situation as best I could. Mrs. Rossi had lived on the street even longer than I had, and I hoped she might have some insight. "That's absolute nonsense," she declared when I finished. "I remember when your grandmother lived here, God rest her soul, and I remember when she left it to you. Those two properties were never connected, not in all my years here." I felt a rush of relief at her words. "Thank you, Mrs. Rossi. Would you be willing to make a statement to that effect if it comes to that?" "Of course, dear. Anything to help. Oh, that reminds me. I think I might have some old photos from block parties back in the day. They might show the property lines. Would that be useful?" "It could be, yes," I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Thank you so much." After Mrs. Rossi left, I felt marginally better. At least I had one ally in the neighborhood. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that this ordeal was far from over. The next few days passed in a tense standoff. Karen and Greg didn't try to send any more workers to my property, but they made their presence known in other ways. They'd stand at the property line, staring at my house and talking loudly about their renovation plans. They put up "No trespassing" signs facing my yard. At one point, I caught Greg measuring my driveway, muttering about how he was going to extend it. I did my best to ignore them and go about my life, but it wasn't easy. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly on edge and waiting for the next confrontation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Amanda called with an update. "I've got good news and bad news," she said. "The good news is that I've secured the injunction. Karen and Greg are legally barred from entering your property or making any changes to it while this dispute is ongoing." I breathed a sigh of relief. "That's great. What's the bad news?" "The bad news is that I've looked into their claim, and it's not completely baseless." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Amanda sighed. "It turns out there was some confusion about the property lines when the original plots were drawn up, way back in the 1950s. Your grandmother's house and the one next door were technically part of the same large lot originally. When the properties were split, there was apparently some paperwork that never got properly filed." "But what does that mean for me?" I asked, dreading the answer. "It means that while your ownership of the house itself is not in question, there could potentially be some dispute over exact property lines. The realtor who sold to Karen and Greg seems to have grossly misinterpreted some old documents and told them they were buying both properties. They're threatening to sue the realtor, the previous owners of their house, and you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "So what do we do now?" "We fight," Amanda said firmly. "Your continuous occupation of the property for 15 years, plus your grandmother's ownership before that, gives us a strong case for adverse possession. Plus, we have your deed, tax records, and all the other documentation proving your ownership. They don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to claiming your actual house. At worst, we might have to negotiate over a few feet of property line." I tried to take comfort in her words, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my whole world was being turned upside down. "What's our next step?" I asked. "We're going to court," Amanda replied. "I've filed a quiet title action to officially clear up any questions about the property ownership once and for all. We'll present our evidence, they'll present theirs, and a judge will make a ruling." "How long will that take?" "It could be a few months, unfortunately. These things rarely move quickly, but the injunction will protect you in the meantime. Just hang in there, Jack. We're going to win this." After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, looking around at the home I'd lived in for so many years. The thought that I might lose even a small part of it made my chest tight, but I was determined to fight with everything I had. Little did I know, the real battle was just beginning. The next few months were some of the most stressful of my life. Even with the injunction in place, Karen and Greg seemed determined to make my life miserable. They couldn't come onto my property, but they found plenty of other ways to harass me. They'd throw loud parties that went late into the night, with music blasting and guests spilling onto their front lawn, shouting and laughing. When I'd leave for work in the morning, I'd often find my car blocked in by their guests' vehicles. They started putting up garish lawn decorations right at the property line, giant inflatable characters, blinking lights, you name it. I did my best to take the high road, documenting everything but never engaging directly. I knew they were trying to provoke me into doing something that could be used against me in court. Meanwhile, Amanda was working tirelessly on our case. She'd managed to track down some of the original surveyor's records from when the properties were first divided, which clearly showed the intended property lines. She also found records of my grandmother's property taxes going back decades, which matched the current boundaries. "This is all great evidence," she assured me during one of our meetings, "but we need to be prepared for a fight." Karen and Greg's lawyer is arguing that the original division of the properties was never properly recorded, which technically could mean the larger plot still exists as one unit. "But how can that be?" I asked, frustrated. "People have been living in these separate houses, paying separate taxes, for over half a century." Amanda nodded. "Exactly. That's where adverse possession comes in. Even if there was some technical error in the original division, the fact that these properties have been treated as separate for so long gives us a strong case, but we need to be thorough. Can you think of anyone else who might be able to testify about the history of these properties?" I thought for a moment. "Well, there's Mrs. Rossi next door. She's lived here since the houses were built, and I think my uncle might have some old photos from when my grandmother first moved in." "Perfect," Amanda said. "Get statements from both of them. The more evidence we have of long-term separate ownership, the better." As the court date approached, I threw myself into gathering evidence. I dug through old photo albums, finding pictures of birthday parties and family gatherings that clearly showed the boundaries between the properties. I collected statements from longtime neighbors, all confirming that the houses had always been separate. Mrs. Rossi was particularly helpful. Not only did she provide a detailed statement about the history of the neighborhood, but she also dug up an old home movie from the 1960s that showed a clear fence line between the properties. "I remember when your grandmother put that fence up," Mrs. Rossi told me as we watched the grainy footage. "The neighbor at the time, what was his name? Johnson, I think. He helped her. They were such good friends." These little snippets of history gave me renewed determination. This wasn't just about a piece of property, it was about preserving my family's legacy and the memories we'd built here. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. I put on my best suit, trying to project an air of confidence I didn't entirely feel. As I left the house, I saw Karen and Greg emerging from theirs, equally dressed up. We exchanged cold glares before getting into our respective cars. The courtroom was intimidating, all polished wood and stern-faced officials. I sat beside Amanda, trying not to fidget as the judge entered and the proceedings began. Karen and Greg's lawyer went first, presenting their case. He talked about the original property lines, the alleged clerical error in dividing the plots, and how his clients had purchased the property in good faith, believing they were getting both houses. I had to admire his skill. He made it sound almost reasonable. If I hadn't known better, I might have been convinced myself. Then it was our turn. Amanda stood, exuding calm confidence. "Your Honor," she began, "while it's true that there may have been some clerical oversights when these properties were originally divided, the fact remains that for over 60 years, they have functioned as separate entities. My client and his family have occupied this home continuously for decades, paying taxes, maintaining the property, and treating it in every way as their own." She proceeded to lay out our evidence, the tax records, the survey maps, the neighbor statements, even Mrs. Rossi's old home movie. I watched the judge's face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction, but he remained impassive. "Furthermore," Amanda continued, "even if we accept the plaintiff's argument that the original division was flawed, my client has a clear claim to the property through adverse possession. He and his grandmother before him have openly and notoriously occupied this land for well over the statutory period required for adverse possession claims in our state." The legal jargon made my head spin a bit, but I could tell from the judge's thoughtful nod that Amanda's arguments were hitting home. After she finished, Karen and Greg's lawyer had a chance for rebuttal. He tried to poke holes in our evidence, suggesting that the neighbor's memories might be faulty or that the tax records could have been based on incorrect information. But Amanda was ready for every argument. She calmly redirected the judge's attention to the mountain of evidence we'd presented, emphasizing the decades of consistent treatment of the properties as separate entities. Finally, after what felt like hours of back and forth, the judge called for a brief recess to review all the evidence. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Karen's eye. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw a flicker of doubt on her face. Amanda squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You did great," she whispered. "I think the judge is on our side, but let's not celebrate yet." Those 15 minutes of recess felt like an eternity. I paced the hallway, running through every moment of the hearing in my head, second-guessing everything. What if we'd missed something crucial? What if the judge sided with Karen and Greg? Finally, we were called back in. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear as the judge began to speak. After careful consideration of the evidence presented by both parties, he said, his voice measured and authoritative, "I find in favor of the defendant, Jack Thompson." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Amanda grinned and patted me on the back as the judge continued. While there may have been some administrative oversights in the original division of the property, the overwhelming evidence shows that these have functioned as separate properties for well over half a century. Mr. Thompson and his family have openly and continuously occupied the disputed property, paying taxes and maintaining it as their own. This more than satisfies the requirements for adverse possession, even if we were to accept the plaintiff's argument about the original property lines. I glanced over at Karen and Greg. They looked shell-shocked, whispering furiously to their lawyer. Furthermore, the judge went on, I find the plaintiff's claim to ownership of both properties to be without merit. The evidence clearly shows that they were misinformed about the extent of the property they were purchasing. While this is unfortunate, it is a matter to be taken up with their realtor, not Mr. Thompson. The judge then issued his official ruling, confirming my ownership of the property and setting the boundaries exactly where they had been for the past 60 years. He also ordered Karen and Greg to pay my legal fees, given the baseless nature of their claim. As we left the courtroom, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over. My home was safe. Karen and Greg brushed past us without a word, their faces red with anger and embarrassment. Part of me wanted to say something smug, to rub in our victory, but I held my tongue. There was no need to antagonize them further. Congratulations, Jack, Amanda said, shaking my hand. You stood your ground and justice prevailed. How does it feel? I thought for a moment. Honestly, I'm just glad it's over. I want to go home and sleep for about a week. She laughed. I don't blame you. Go home and relax. You've earned it. The drive home was surreal. After months of stress and uncertainty, it was hard to believe that it was really over. As I pulled into my driveway, without a doubt, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I walked around the property, reacquainting myself with every inch of land that I'd fought so hard to keep. The vegetable garden that Karen and Greg's workers had destroyed was starting to grow back. I made a mental note to replant it properly now that I knew it was safe. As I stood there, taking it all in, I saw Mrs. Rossi coming out of her house. She hurried over, a hopeful look on her face. Well, she asked anxiously, how did it go? I couldn't help but grin. We won. The judge ruled in our favor on all counts. Mrs. Rossi clapped her hands in delight. Oh, I'm so glad. I knew justice would prevail. Your grandmother would be so proud of how you fought for your home. Her words hit me hard, bringing tears to my eyes. In all the legal battles and neighborhood drama, I'd almost lost sight of what this place really meant to me. It wasn't just a house or a piece of property. It was a connection to my family, to my history. Thank you, I said, giving Mrs. Rossi a hug. I couldn't have done it without your help. As we chatted, I saw Karen and Greg's car pull into their driveway. They got out, pointedly avoiding looking in our direction as they went inside. Mrs. Rossi shook her head. Such a shame. They could have been good neighbors if they hadn't started all this nonsense. Do you think they'll stay? I shrugged. I don't know, but I hope we can all move past this eventually. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. Karen and Greg kept to themselves, clearly embarrassed by the whole ordeal. I made a point of being civil when our paths crossed, but it was clear that any chance of a friendly neighbor relationship had been thoroughly destroyed. As for me, I threw myself into fixing up the house and yard. I repainted the exterior, replanted my vegetable garden, and finally got around to all those little repair jobs I'd been putting off. Each improvement felt like a reaffirmation of my ownership, a way of saying, this is my home, and I'm here to stay. One evening, as I was watering my new tomato plants, I saw a moving truck pull up to Karen and Greg's house. I watched as they loaded up their belongings, not quite sure how to feel. On one hand, I was relieved that the source of so much stress would be gone. On the other, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness at how badly things had turned out. As they were finishing up, Greg walked over to me. It was the first time we'd spoken since the court hearing. We're leaving, he said, stating the obvious. Got a job offer in another state. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Greg sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I want to apologize. We were wrong about the property, and we handled it badly. Very badly. I'm sorry for all the trouble we caused you. His apology caught me off guard, but I appreciated it. Thank you, I said. I'm sorry things turned out this way. I hope you have better luck in your new place. We shook hands, and Greg went back to finish loading the truck. As I watched them drive away, I felt a sense of closure. That night, I sat on my front porch, looking out at the quiet street. The last rays of sunset were painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A warm breeze carried the scent of freshly mowed grass and blooming flowers. I thought about everything that had happened, the stress, the fear, the long legal battle. But I also thought about the support I'd received from people like Mrs. Rossi and Amanda, and how this ordeal had deepened my appreciation for this place I called home. In the end, I realized, this wasn't just a story about a property dispute. It was a story about standing up for what's right, about the importance of community, and about the true meaning of home. As I sat there, feeling truly at peace for the first time in months, I knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, I was ready to face them, secure in the knowledge that this was where I belonged. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.